with Halloween in America, we want to be scary and we want to dress up and scare children, get candy and everything. But in the Mexican tradition, it's more focused on that cultural significance and that bridge between life and death and remembering and honoring.
People in our families who have died and our ancestors, in a sense, are always with us, but we don't always take the time to slow down and think about them. So this altar allows us to do that.
I think this is really important, especially for like non-Latino people maybe that are curious on like for example, the difference between Halloween and Day of the Dead, understand like maybe how the media represents it versus how it's actually practiced.
Doing something like the altar that we built behind me here, it's been a pretty amazing experience for somebody like myself who hasn't really gotten a chance to do this. I've kind of seen it more through social media, pop culture.
It allows us to share stories about our loved ones, and that kind of communal conversation and connections are really important for us.
I think it'll be really, really heavy and deep in such a beneficial way for a lot of people once the community comes in and they bring in the photos of their loved ones.